Oh, my gosh. Starting right out with a letter. Sad music, please, Aaron. There, Andrew. There we go. Hey, Curly. I can tell you know nothing about student loans. I strongly suggest you keep your trap shut until you know something about them. Talk to these people. Quit defending the Department of Education's loan scam, you schmuck. At least you spelled my name right. Alan, my buddy.
John Curley.
Alan, I got to tell you something.
Best friends forever.
Yeah, Alan, let me say something. I like the fact that you wrote me. And secondly, I've spent like 8 hours reading everything you've done. And I'm going to start with this. I really, really respect for 20 years, you have been a dog on a bone. I mean, you have been everywhere talking about college loans, how ineffective it is or how corrupt it is. I followed all the way from 1970. And then when they got in there and they had the crazy stuff that was happening where they were paying off the college, the people that were getting the kids into college. And then there were banks were scoring money and giving these people money. And I mean, it's so unbelievably corrupt. And you're just constantly pointing every single time. You're like, look, college is too expensive. These loans, we need to wipe this stuff out and start all over again. So I want you to educate me and everybody else without getting into, how the CBO, decides, where the money is and where the loan is and whether it's a value to the loan, without getting into all sort of the economics of it. Can we talk about this without getting into like how they mark the books on where these loans are and what the interest is and whether or not the government's making money off of this? Can we talk about in a higher level? Is that possible, Alan? Okay.
I would love to talk about
okay.
And I should say,
yes.
I do apologize for
No, it's all right. I don't care. My father called me a lot worse than that, Alan. So let's get started. So if you, Alan, if you could start this entire program of college loans, right? So we started the region. It started in the 50s. The idea that, oh my gosh, look, Russians, Sputniks, they're doing so much better. They're educating their people better than we are. We need to get involved in this thing. Then the men came back from World War II, and we decided we're going to send these vets to college. They thought 8 million would go, 10 million went. All of a sudden, there was all this need for college education. Then the government gets in, and the government says, hey, let's turn it over to the private sector. Let the banks get in there. We'll back these loans. The banks don't have to worry about this sort of stuff. And then it gets all mixed up with a whole bunch of junk. So if you could just wipe the board clean, how would you structure college loans?
Well, assuming that loans are even appropriate for college anymore, and I'm not convinced that the government really has any business to be in the lending business, but when the loans were originally rolled out in 1965, President Johnson declared the loans would be free of interest. Today, the government's profiting over $100 billion in profit. And, a lot of that profit is used to fund very controversial things like Obamacare, et cetera.
Yes.
But if we have to have loans, there's got to be all the standard consumer protections that all other loans have, most notably bankruptcy protections. Nobody wants to file for bankruptcy, but the founding fathers called for uniform bankruptcy rights in the Constitution, ahead of every right listed in the Bill of Rights, ahead of the power to declare war and even raise an army in the Constitution. And people like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and others, they were being badly hurt by British banks, merchants, friends of the king, etc. So it's a very good reason to have uniform bankruptcy rights in this country. And the student loan exception to that wisdom. Student loans are the only type of loan to be uniquely stripped of this constitutional right. It lies really at the heart of everything. So if we're going to have loans going forward, and frankly, John, the current lending program it's done. It's toast.
It is.
By
Okay.
all rational metrics.
Yes.
But if we're going to have loans going forward, they have at least got to have the same bankruptcy rights as all other loans. That's the only way to keep the lending side behaving in good faith, cracking the whip on the schools to keep prices rational. There's got to be a feedback loop there, and that's what bankruptcy rights provide.
So let's I'll agree with you. Let's get the government out of it, because whenever the government is involved in anything, whether it's healthcare, 157% increase since 2000, whether it's in college, 147% increase, it's every time the government gets involved, it breaks the marketplace and then creates unhealthy incentives for whoever is on the receiving end of the dollar to disrupt and not hold it accountable to just normal supply-demand rules. So if we get the government out of there, and then we have private sectors, well, then so we would agree that if it's a private bank would come along and say, okay, I'll tell you what, if you want to major in non-binary bowling, then you're going to pay 45% interest. But if you want to major in STEM, then we're going to charge you 6%. Would you be agreeable with something like that?
I completely agree. Every loan needs to be underwritten with common sense in mind. And quite frankly, I don't think any private lender would probably give a loan for a gender studies or underwater basket weaving type degree.
But the problem is loans do go out for that. These kids get these loans and then they get out there and 38% of them, the ROI on the thing is terrible. They've got this giant debt. They go into the marketplace thinking somebody's going to hire them for basket weaving. And then they're like, oh my God, I can't pay for any of this stuff, right?
Well, yeah, and this all comes back to the government and Congress stripping not only bankruptcy rights, but truth in lending laws, fair debt collection laws, statutes of limitations, all taken away from student loans. And this has removed all the risk away from the government. The government is making money hand over fist on this. They've made a king's ransom, takes all the risk and puts it directly onto the backs of the borrowers. So, I see so many well-intentioned conservatives out there, and they've been completely hoodwinked. They've been propagandized by the colleges who are making a mint out of this, make no mistake, but also the Department of Education and just really a pit viper's nest of people in and around Washington, D.C. who are making the benefit of all this revenue, not a good idea. And what happens is, conservatives out there, their first response is to blame the borrowers, to wag their finger at the people being wrecked by this loan scam, rather than looking at the lending program itself. This is really not a bad borrower thing.
So let's walk everybody through. So let's say let's use 50,000 because it's easy to do the math. Okay, some kid takes out a loan for $50,000, right? Then gets a job and then they can never really pay it off because the interest keeps accruing every single year on this thing. Unlike a mortgage, you get a 30-year mortgage, which is crazy that they even invented a 30-year mortgage. But a 30-year mortgage is locked in. The bank's getting screwed because you got it at 4%. The value of the house keeps going up on that thing, right? And inflation doesn't include the 4%, just sits right there. But for the average kid gets a $50,000 loan, and then the interest accrues over and every single year. They never get out from underneath it. Explain how that happens.
Well, it's not just the interest, John, because of the laws the way they are, and because the whole system has been perverted to where a defaulted loan can be far, far, far more lucrative to the lending industry than a loan that remains in good standing.
Okay, good. That's great. That's Alan. Explain that. How is it more lucrative to have a defaulted loan?
Well, for the lenders, when a loan defaults, huge collection rates, penalties, and other incentives are provided to them. So, for example, let's say you default on a $50,000 federal student loan. The lending industry will do everything possible to coax you into, quote unquote, rehabilitating that loan.
Yes.
Which means you pay them for 10 months. None of it goes to the loan. It all goes into their pocket. At the end of that term, you sign for a much larger loan, probably around $100,000 with all the penalties, interest, et cetera. And these lending companies get a 16% commission, a check from the government for $16,000.
There we go.
That is far more money than you can ever make on a loan that remains in good stead. So the whole thing is just the incentives are completely perverted. It's the hallmark definition of a predatory loan scam.
Yeah. So you would be good with a loan like a bank would lend to the student. Now, the problem is there's no collateral. With a house, you got collateral. With a car, you can repossess it, right? In this case, it's all future predictability of whether or not the kid will be able to generate enough money to pay that loan back off again, right? if you had all three involved and everybody had skin in the game, the student wouldn't take out and wouldn't study something that's not going to do well. The college or the person loaning the money would also, he's got obviously skin in the game. But how would the college get involved in this as well so that they start to feel the pinch where they have to provide good education that will eventually pay off for everybody involved?
That's a great question. I love it. In 2022, we had a very good bipartisan bankruptcy bill in Congress that would have essentially clawed back up to half of the amount originally borrowed from the colleges in the case of a bankruptcy discharge. It was a good bill. It probably wouldn't have been enforced really strongly against colleges. It wouldn't have, closed any schools or anything like that. It was pretty modest. But I think that is probably the best way to make sure that the colleges have skin in the game. And, over time, they'll have to lower their prices. They won't be able to charge these astronomical amounts. And that's good for, everyone, certainly all the borrowers, but not only the financially needy borrowers who have to take out the loans, but also for the, moderately wealthy families who have to pay full freight for their kids. This lending system has inflated not only the price for borrowers, but the price for non-borrowers is my point.
Right. So speaking to the
free market economics.
Right. Speaking to the conservative side of it is you took out the loan, you studied in some ridiculous thing. Screw you. If you want us, 12% of the U.S. population's got these loans and goes to college. Everybody else, the guy driving the truck, putting up drywall, why should he have to pay for your crappy education that you got from that crappy college where they taught you to hate America? Right? Isn't that just that's where those are the two sides right now, right?
Those are basically the two sides. But what conservatives don't understand is that the Department of Education have made almost every nickel that they ever lent out back in payments from the borrowers. So that $1.7 trillion outstanding that everybody talks about, that is by and large interest. It's profit. And, President Trump knows this, by the way. In 2015, Donald Trump was like, why do we view student loans as a profit center?
Yes.
Of all the places we probably shouldn't be making money, it would be student loans. And so I see, other conservatives, thoughtful conservatives who've really looked at this lending program come around to the same viewpoint that I have and that apparently you agree with. I'm glad to hear.
I do. So but the thing that scares some people is like you're pushing and you've been doing this for 20 years. You're constantly up there lobbying. You're always pushing. I think you got 50 different states and all sorts of petitions. But when people hear, oh, we want to make it easier to declare bankruptcy, that's the thing that the hair on the back of people's necks stand up like, whoa, okay, then it's just going to be easier for me to walk away from the loan.
Yeah, but nobody wants to file for bankruptcy. It is as stigmatizing, as unpleasant. Certainly no recent graduate from college. They're not like, oh, I'm ambitious, I'm hopeful, I'm going to, I'm going to flee to bankruptcy court and discharge my debt. That just doesn't happen. Back when in the 70s, when student loans were treated the same as all other loans in bankruptcy proceedings, the discharge rate for student loans was far lower than the average discharge rate for other loans. So, that's a terrible argument. And by the way, if they can do to other loans what they've done to student loans, they would love to make bankruptcy impossible for credit cards, for, pretty much every nickel of consumer debt that you can think of. And that's exactly what the founders did not want to see when they called for uniform bankruptcy rights.
So let me let me tell you something here. As much as you apologize for calling me a schmuck, I don't care. Here's what I like about this. You saw this thing. Where did we put this thing up, Joe? Somewhere, I don't know where it was. Somehow Alan found it.
Well, he was responding to something completely unrelated to student loans.
And then here's what it created for me, Alan. I thank you for your apology. Completely unnecessary. It allowed me it spurred me to spend all of last night 3 hours digging into this incredibly complex issue when we start to talk about, government when it comes to how they treasury rates and market value rates and how you decide, are we losing money or gaining money? And then I spent hours watching you. I saw you driving down the road in a snow-covered, highway or something. The beard I'm not sure about. And I'm like, I like the fact that this guy has been fighting, and I'm sure in the wilderness for years, Alan. 60 Minutes you've been on, and CBS. I saw this ridiculous interview you did with Fox, but they didn't let you talk at all. Right? I'm like, I honor anyone that is passionate about trying to make change and pushing this giant rock up this hill. And I hope for everyone an education can be affordable, obtainable, and people don't resent people that have gotten the loans or not paying the loans back. We clear the decks, get the government out of it, have colleges actually start to provide a good education that could then be taken into the marketplace, and then the person can utilize what they've learned. Are we all in agreement there?
I certainly am. It's been a tough road over 20 years.
I know.
Not anybody, but every time I have an informed, civil conversation, it almost always goes like this conversation we're having tonight. You know, it's just terrible that politics and the two parties, I can't stand either party, by the way. The whole thing has just completely pitted people against each other who should not be fighting. They should be together.
Right. Because we all want an educated society. We all want everyone to be able to succeed to their greatest ability. And if it's college that helps them or not college, whatever it is, each individual should be able to grow to their fullest extent, to be the best person they could possibly be, to contribute to society and themselves as well.
Couldn't agree more.
There we go. There we go.
Boom.
Boom. Alan, thank you so much. Continue the big fight. I so much appreciate all your hard work. And by the way, so we can find, where's all his stuff, by the way? Where is all his, studentjustice.org? Where is this thing, Alan? Where are you under again? Founder of the studentloanjustice.org. All right. If listeners that have these positions, right or left or whatever, go and see the work that Alan has done over there at founder of the studentloanjustice.org. Keep up the good fight, my friend. Thanks so much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, my friend. Bye-bye. There he goes out the door.